So, hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Sean Lorden, the host of our Hooked on Health podcast. And today I'm honored to have Fran Quinn of the PGA Tour of Champions, Northwestern grad, and St. John's High School grad. We'll have to talk about your high school career record because it's a wild record. Fran never lost in high school golf, which is, I don't know if there's anybody in Massachusetts can say that today. But super excited to have him on board here. And yeah, let's just kind of get into it. You want to just tell us a little bit about yourself,
Yeah,
Fran,
well,
and
thanks for having
your
me,
history?
Sean. I've been fortunate to play the game for 37 years. Started out playing a lot of golf locally and junior golf and state amateurs, and was fortunate enough to kind of go on and play golf in college. I was recruited by Northwestern and UNC, North Carolina, Duke, Miami, and it kind of came down to two schools on where I was thinking of going, and so I was signed, sealed, and delivered to go to UNC, and they were the number one team in the country, and I was just completely blown away that they were offering me a full scholarship to go to school there, and I was all excited about it, and Michael Jordan had just won, the NCAA championships, and he was there, so I was all fired up. Well, as it turned out, they won the national championship the year prior to me going to school, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at their team, and Davis Love's a junior and he's the oldest on the team, and I'm like, wait a second, I might not play next year. So I actually decommitted and decided to go to Northwestern, which I caught a lot of flack over the years from Davis Love for, but he ended up turning pro about 2 weeks after I decommitted, so I put the blame back on him. But anyways, it ended up being a great experience at school and furthered on. So I ended up playing a lot of years out on tour, and 37 years. I played 26 major championships, 5 U.S. Opens, 5 senior U.S. Opens, won 6 times around the world. Really had great experiences playing a game I loved and truly loved, and met a lot of great people and traveled the world. So, my family, my family, we've really been blessed to be able to take golf and, have a job that you really look forward to doing each and every day. And I loved it. And I loved the challenges.
I think that's great. And I want to get into what it took and what it still takes to be excellent at the sport. I think that's really important to talk about. But tell me when you realized, Fran, like when did you was it a moment that you like woke up and said, this is something that I can actually do for a living? Like what did that look like? The transition from it's a passion and I'm really good at this to I'm going to be a professional at this and not just a club pro, but like a tour pro. What did
So
that look like for you?
if we really go back, it was probably when I was 11 years old. And not that I had any great expectations that I was going to play on tour, but I always was just enamored by these guys. And it was during the tournament over here at Pleasant Valley. And I went up when I was 11, and it was a designated event. So that would be the equivalent of today, a signature event, where you had the best players on tour were all required to play the event. And there I was, a little kid behind 13 green. Nicholas is coming by, his caddy Angelo, and I'm screaming, "Can I have a ball? Can I have a ball?" And he threw me a ball, and there's just, I mean, it seemed like millions of people, and there was tens of thousands of people out there watching. And he threw me a ball, and and that kind of really got all my juices going, and I ended up, winning the New England Juniors and in the state juniors, and playing, at a pretty high level. But where I really kind of the switch really turned is when I was maybe my first year as a pro. I came and I won the Mass Open that year, and I got an exemption into Pleasant Valley. And I shot 66 the third round. I was 24 years old, and I was leading the tournament going into the final day. And when I tell you I did not sleep that night, I did not sleep one wink. And all my heroes were playing in that tournament. And here I am going off, local kid, on the first tee with 20,000 people on both sides of the fairway, and just so excited for that moment. And little did I know that Kenny Perry would birdie the first 5 holes. So before I teed off, I was already 3 back. But it was just that there kind of let me knew that I had what it took to maybe play this game professionally at a high level for a career. And I've been fortunate to have been able to do it.
That's awesome. Where'd you finish that tournament?
I finished 9th.
Okay.
So I didn't quite get it done, but still was a heck of a week.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I actually started dating my wife that week.
I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah,
That's a
30
big
years
week.
later. So I won.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced, your early years on tour?
I think my biggest challenges were that I was a perfectionist. And I always wanted to be perfect. And I wanted to, you know, swing the club perfectly. And you're surrounded with guys who are just so incredibly talented. And I'll tell you a story with my rookie year on tour. I was on the right-hand side of the range in Tucson, and I remember it like yesterday. And it was myself here, Jay Haas to my left, wonderful guy, and Freddie Couples was 2 people to my left. And we're all hitting balls, and we had early tee times that day, and Jay Haas picked up his balls, and he walked away. And Freddie and him were best friends. He goes, Jay, where are you going? And he said, if I listen to you flush the ball the way you're flushing it right now, I'm not going to be able to break 80 out here today. So I'm going to go warm up on my own and see how I do. And I was sitting there and it's like, that was kind of my attitude, is you had to be perfect. And as you learn and as you grow, you're never going to be perfect. And golf isn't a game of perfect, nor is life. And so you just try to take, what you're really good at and make it a little better, because what got you there is pretty darn good.
Yeah. It's an interesting take. And, I always think of, there's multiple ways to look at that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so maybe you can kind of spin that around for like an amateur golfer who's a 10 handicap.
Mm-hmm.
Would you give them the same advice, or would you say, maybe something that they're terrible at, try to get mediocre at? What would you say to them?
I would say that the advice 100% holds true for every single level. The thing is, in golf, if you're a 10 to a 20 handicap, you have a bigger room of improvement than a person who is a 5 handicap down to a scratch. So what do you do as a instructor or a teacher or as a coach is to try to relay to them that say, hey, look, what we can do here, we can cut your shots, the 20 handicap down to 13 really quick by showing that individual how to chip and putt and learn and think a little better around the golf course. Getting the person from 5 down to scratch is going to be a little bit different process. Now, you may look at their full swing. You may look at their mental approach. You may look at it might be their short game. Whatever it is, could be a bunch of different reasons why they're having a hard time getting that 1 or 2 shots. But it's definitely, again, golf is not a game of perfect. You've got to be able to understand you're going to have some adversity out there, and you're going to have to learn how to deal with it. And whether, you fatted a shot into the bunker, and understand, okay, I can't be dwelling on the fact that I just hit it in the bunker, but how am I going to get it out onto the green so I can 2-putt and not leave it in the bunker? And so those are the things that I think is the message that I would relay to the 10 to 20 handicap, is that there's definitely room for improvement. Can't be hard on yourself, but really look at what your weaknesses are and take a look at those weaknesses and try to eliminate a little bit of them. You don't have to eliminate all of them.
Yeah. So Fran is a golf coach too. So he he coaches here, and I'm sure other places as well. But I think those are and no matter what kind of handicap you are, I think that's great advice, right? It's like you can improve. But for me personally, because I've taken several lessons from you, Fran, I think the biggest thing is just you have to hire the coach if you plan to improve, right? Because if you're just doing the same things, you're watching the Instagram videos, that's not feedback. We talk about it in physical therapy all the time. When a professional tells you to do something, it's a different level of, okay, now a commitment, number one, right? Because you can see it on video, and then you're told,
Sure.
how to make the changes. But B, I think anybody who's serious about really improving their game, just like anything else in life, you need a coach to get to the next
Yeah, and
level.
I think you can get, caught into the trap of going down that rabbit hole and being like, okay, oh, I can look at this YouTube video, I can look at this one, and understanding that each one of us are different.
Yeah.
And each one of us are going to, when you are on those videos, are going to have a tendency to discuss the things that have affected you in your game and what you've done to rectify those issues. Well, at the end of the day, for an example, and I think we discussed last week, was that take Bryson DeChambeau. Here he is talking about really clearing his hips to create more speed. When Tiger, who is one of the longest hitters in the game, talks about restricting his hips because he over rotates. So everybody's a little bit different. You got to be very careful with how you interpret information that you get off of YouTube or the internet. And more, getting back to the coach, I think having somebody that you have trust in, who understands you, understands your physique, understands what you're trying to achieve, is the world of difference. And that's where you're going to see the greatest improvement.
Yeah, and I think too, the value that you bring to the table too is that mental piece. Having done it at the highest levels, we had a mental performance coach on a couple months ago, and we talked about the automatic negative thoughts, right, that enter your brain. Well, I fatted that chip, so I'm going to fat the next 10. Right, and those are things that's just not a realistic. You could hit 100 chips clean, you fat one, doesn't mean you're going to fat the next chip.
And it's funny that you say that. I heard I don't remember who it was, but they were discussing the best athletes and what's the difference between number one and 25. And so what's the difference between number one in the world in golf and number 25? There's really not that much, as far as ball striking. But the guy 25, good chance when he hits a bad shot, carries with them that extra second. Meanwhile, the guy who's number one, he might be ticked off, in that first 5 or 10 seconds. But in as fast as he had that moment where he was kind of disgusted with what he just did, he flipped the switch of, man, I can't wait to see what I do next because I know it's going to be great.
Yeah.
And that is definitely a tool that we all could use. But, that's what the greatest in the game do.
Yeah. And it's just trust in your practice, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So what is your, let's talk about maybe when you're on tour and today, right?
Yep.
I know you still play events, but what does your daily grind, so to speak, look like when you're a professional golfer?
So when I'm home, I'm up early. I'm an early person. I get up, I foam roll, I do my band work just to get myself moving and getting into a position to where I can actually do what I'm trying to achieve. I get down and I'll probably work 4 or 5 hours on the range or short game, and then always try to play at least 5 or 6 holes, maybe 9 holes a day during my off weeks, just to stay fresh. When I'm out on tour is where things get ramped up. And we're very fortunate where we have the physios and the physio trucks, the workout facility that is all part of a moving caravan that goes with us week in and week out. State-of-the-art facilities, phenomenal PTs like yourself who are in there working with us on a daily basis, and they know our bodies. And they know, again, like the golf swing, everybody's different. So what Langer's working on, Fran Quinn's working on, and Ernie Els is working on are all different, but all trying to accomplish the same goal of being ready to go out and perform at our highest level. So when I go into the physio, I get stretched out. First of all, I heat up every day. And, you get it's old school, and you go right in and you grab the heating pad right out of the hot water, stick it right on your back, lay down and just sit there, and it's the best 10 minutes of the day.
Yeah.
You're just relaxing. And then, they'll come over and they start stretching us out and working us, and knowing that some people are more flexible than others because they know your body. They've worked with you so many different times. I'll go out and play, and whether it's a practice round or a tournament, if it's a tournament round, I'm only on the range for 25 minutes prior to my round, and short game for 25 minutes, and I'm good to go. A normal, a practice round day could be upwards of an hour, hour and a half on the range. Not nearly as long as I used to when I was a kid, just because the body can't take it. when I finish, and we have a lot of bad weather out there. So there's a lot of rounds where you're playing 27 holes. Those are the rounds that are most taxing. People don't realize how many miles you walk during a round of golf.
Yeah.
And, we average about 8 miles a day, and you're playing 27. You're looking at 12 miles mentally focused, grinding. You're exhausted. Your body, gets to a point where it starts shutting down.
Yeah.
And so that's the most important part, is getting into the physio after that. And when I get in and we do like a little heat, but more ice, and we do some light massage just to get your body, kind of recovering. We'll slip on the compression sleeves and the compression boots, and which is just tremendous. But yeah, it's each and every day, everybody just sees you in the 4 hours you're on the golf course, and it's a 10-hour day, and that's what we spend. And and I look back at it over 37 years, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Now, would you see the physios like literally every single day after?
Every day.
Yeah. That's an interesting kind of take, because the way that we kind of look at things, I guess, but that's the difference between being a professional and being on tour. And your body is your lifeline.
It is. I mean, that is absolutely, it's the only thing that you can take care of, and that's going to allow you to perform. And you have to do it. Now, granted, I don't do it when I'm home. I mean, I work out and I try to keep my body in decent shape, but I don't do it as much as I should.
Right.
And my advice would be for everybody to do it more. And because when we grew up, and I grew up, I'm not saying we were always reactive with PT.
Yeah.
And never proactive. And all the kids and players and athletes today are incredibly proactive. And, with trainers, with PT people who are all part of their team. And a lot of these young guys travel with this team.
Yeah.
And their mental coaches and so forth. So they've been on top of this. We're playing catch up, and it's like for years we didn't do enough. And now we're trying to do more, and that's why you're seeing the longevity of guys who are playing the Champions Tour, which used to be 52 or 3 or 4 years old, to Langer winning when he was 67 last week.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen more often because guys are in better shape.
Yeah, and it's funny, I feel like we were talking offline about Tiger Woods and the effect that he had on golf, and really, bringing fitness into golf.
He did.
I think that, more people, just as a society, we're starting to realize the power of, physical therapy isn't just something you go to after surgery, right? It's something that really, to me, and the way that I talk about it, is we're sort of a combination between a chiropractor, a massage therapist, a personal trainer, and a rehab expert, right?
And mental health.
And mental health, too, because you spend an hour with people. And
but you feel better, when you do, and you come in and you work, and, whether it's a workout, whether you see your PT, and, there's nothing better than walking out of the physio before a round and you're all stretched out and you're opened up. It's like, I'm ready to go.
In the same thing, so, we've got a TrackMan simulator downstairs here. And, what I tell people is like, go see your PT before you go practice, because they're going to open everything up. You get the hot pack, you get some Graston, maybe dry needling, whatever we use for interventions, some stretches, and then you're all opened up to be able to, fire away.
And that's the beauty of this facility, is that, the clients have access to that. And, you have 2 wonderful TPI certified experts downstairs, and along with the PTs who can do all that, but also some golf specific stuff. Right. So that when they come in, now they actually get that feeling of being a tour player, because that's what we get every week out on tour.
You heard it here first.
And now you have an opportunity to experience that firsthand.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit too, but to me it looks like this. It looks like sort of like a triangle, right, of needs for to be able to golf at your highest level. And I feel like it's strength, right? It's pliability or mobility, and then it's professional coaching, right? At the highest level. If you really want to improve your game, you're a 10 handicap on listening to this, or 15 or 20, to your point, like you've got the most leverage to be able to get up to a single digit, because that might just be getting better around the green.
Sure.
That's, and then you get to the 5 handicap, and then it gets a little dicier. That's maybe decisions like you were saying around the golf course. But again, without that coaching piece, you could be the best athlete in the world, but if you don't know how to use that power or transition it, you're never going to be able to reach the apex of what you could be as a player.
There's no doubt about it, and couldn't agree more. And I mean, it just you bringing that up about the 5, 10, and 15 handicaps. I think back to, God rest his soul, my dad, who was a tremendous golfer, but an amateur golfer, and basically taught myself and my brothers everything we know about the game at a young age.
Yeah.
And it was probably a couple years prior to him passing away, and he used to always write his notes down on a note card. It could be a napkin, it could be anything. And he wrote some notes down on a napkin. This was in December 30th, prior to me leaving to go overseas to play. Put it in an envelope, gave it to me, open it up when I get over there. And it was basically him being the mental coach of, let's spend some more time 50 yards and in. Let's spend some more time right around the greens. Let's spend a little bit more time with the putter, and let's become a better driver of the golf ball. It sounds like a lot. You only need to be a little bit better to be one of the best in the world. Good luck. And it's just, those are the things. It's like, you don't have to be a lot better, but a little bit better. You get a little bit better at 20, you're going to get down to 15. You get a little better at 5, you're going to get to a 3. And that's a big accomplishment, and I think there's a lot to be said for that.
What do you think it takes, for an amateur golfer, single digit, to really improve from, like, let's say a 10 to a scratch golfer, let's say 8 to 10 to a scratch golfer? What does that daily schedule look like in season, off season? Like, what kind of blocked work specifically do they have to put in to get better?
Well, I think, again, it's a lot of the time restraints that come with that. People have jobs. Amateur players have jobs, and they're working. Some are working, remotely. Some are working 9 to 5 jobs. Other ones are working, and they have the availability and flexibility to do what they need to do, as their money's making money for them when they're away from the office.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think it's so very important for everybody to really take a look at themselves and be like, okay, what can I do? What can I physically handle? Can I hit balls 2 days a week? In those 2 days a week, what am I going to spend my time on? And I think that's where I come into play, and you come into play. I could say, look, I think you need to be a little bit more flexible. You're having a little harder time getting into this position. By you getting into this position, which you can achieve, you are going to become a better player. And, who knows? I don't know if that's 2 shots. Is that 3 shots? But you're going to become better. And I think that's, the big things to realize.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way that we describe it, Fran, is like, you'll come in and say, my shoulder hurts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll assess and we'll say, okay, your shoulder hurts, and then we find out, let's say it's impingement, right? So I'll say, okay, you should get shoulder impingement. It's going to take, I need to see you, it's a very clear plan.
Sure.
Right? So like the sessions are 45 minutes to an hour. I need to see you twice a week or 3 times a week for the first couple weeks. And then, we explain the process of like what it takes to really strengthen and stretch a muscle.
Sure.
Muscles, I always say, like, you don't build biceps overnight. It takes really 10 to 12 weeks to change, to really hypertrophy or strengthen muscle tissue, so you can see a noticeable change in the tissue. So as that process happens, it's going to happen simultaneously with that player getting, really getting their coaching, right? So
Sure.
if they're coached twice a week or once a week or whatever, they're doing their skill drills, their body is taking 3 months to really change. But it's like that slow process, right? So like sort of like investing money. You put money in and it slowly gains interest over time and you get your dividends later on. PT, it's really like a 3-month process is how I explain it. You don't get the biceps overnight. And then the same thing with stretching. The biggest thing with stretching is that you have to do it once you get that muscle length, which I'm sure you felt on tour. you have to stretch every single day.
You do.
You know, that tissue 60 seconds every single day, especially for those, those groups that are really tight, like the hip flexors, hamstrings, calves, the shoulders around the torso.
Guilty.
Yeah, and we all get it because we're all doing, this is a society where you sit a lot, and even if you're walking a lot, then things get tight. And that's why it's so important to pair not only with a coach that knows the TPI, like knows how a golf swing should look, but then a PT who knows how the body needs to move, right? And like, where do we strengthen, where do we stretch? But I think the most important thing, like if anybody listens to this, you got to get the muscle length back, and that takes, people have trigger points, right? So a lot of the times the trigger points in the tissue from when you break down muscle and build it back up, you develop trigger points. That's what massage, that's why massage therapists literally have, a profession is to get in there and break up those trigger points. Now you've got new muscle length, but you have to stretch that tissue so that it stays that way and the brain recognizes it and it continues to work at that level. So, at that new muscle length. So oftentimes I'll see people, they'll come to PT for 6 weeks. They'll say, oh, well, I feel great after 6 weeks. They'll go back to their daily routine, and then it's just not, it doesn't include stretching. Or they're stretching, or their PT says, just stretch 3 to 4 times a week and you're good. The strengthening is great 3 to 4 times a week. That's fine. But you have to do those stretches every single day and stack it like after brushing your teeth or before you go to bed at night. It's got to be a habit. And that's, I feel like, what the most successful people that, don't come back to see us for the same issue over and over again, they're people with the best habits.
And I think that holds true with the golf swing. It's like in order to get better, you have to put the time in. And, whether you can, give it 2 days or 3 days, but, in the perfect world, I'd love to help somebody out, give them an hour lesson, and have them be able to work on that 2 or 3 times a week and give it at least an hour a day before I see them again. And if they're able to do that, we're both giving each other a chance to succeed. I'm going to be able to get the most out of that student, and the student is going to reap the benefits, because they will reap the benefits, because it's, repetition and hearing things. And no matter what, you always hear things. I can say something one way one day, and the next time you see me, I might say it the same way or slightly different, and it resonates. And I think it's the same thing with PT. It's like you sit there and you tell somebody, hey, do this, do this, do this. You're like, that's great, I'm doing it, but I'm not seeing anything. And all of a sudden, boom, now I can do it. And that takes me to, I had shoulder surgery at a unfortunate incident and smashed my shoulder. And so now I have to go through basically 2 years of rehab. The first year of rehab, I could not get my arm above my waist. And there was no feedback. I had no feedback from all this time and effort that I was in there doing it. And my physio was telling me, you're doing an amazing job. And my doctor kept telling me to stay patient. And legitimately 12 months on that day, he goes, okay, now we're going to go in. You've built up the strength. We're going to go in, we're going to clear out a little scar tissue, and you're going to see a remarkable improvement. And a year and a half later, I was the oldest qualifier ever for the U.S. Open, at the country club. And, I went from here to being able to go like this, which I never thought would happen again.
And that speaks to the relationship, too, between your PT, you, and the surgeon, right? Because was it an ORIF? They went in and kind of cleaned things up afterwards.
Second one, yeah. Scar tissue and so forth.
It was a fracture.
I completely fractured the glenoid.
Yeah, so that's,
it was massive.
To come back from that. And
they took my clavicle. And they said if in fact you were going to go in and replace that shoulder, you would never play golf at a high level again. And so what Mark Price did, God rest his soul, he did the surgery, and he basically took my clavicle, moved that over, a couple screws and so forth, but basically rebuilt my shoulder with my parts. And I can't believe it. He did an amazing job.
Yeah, so for the audience, that's not a common...
It's not.
99 times out of 100, if you're not a professional athlete like Fran, they're doing a total shoulder in that scenario.
That's it.
If the tissue is viable and if the joint is viable, or they're just putting in screws and trying to save what they can. So to get that full range of motion back, and again, it just speaks to the relationship with the providers, right? Because to get only the chicken wing effect after a year, there's a lot of trust there, because that's really still presents to me like a fully torn rotator cuff, and
Yeah, I mean,
so it's incredible.
yeah, you're just sitting there, and it was hard. I was going in 5 days a week for 2 hours a day, and did not miss a day. And that was for an entire year. And I just kept coming back, and I would say to my wife, I'm like, is this going to get better? And I go, and my PT at the time was like, it's going to get better.
Yeah.
You got to believe. And I did. And fortunate it did.
How do you feel? I guess looking ahead, maybe the tour, even just area pros around here. How do you see? We talked about Tiger kind of changing the game of fitness, and everybody's now, the bodybuilders like Bryson hitting the ball 400 yards. How do you see PT and personal training and the fitness industry changing the PGA in the next like 10 or 20 years?
Well, I think they're going to have to. I think PTs are going to be is as important or more important than swing coaches.
Yeah.
And I say that because these athletes have been lifting from an incredibly young age, and there's wear and tear that also puts on your body.
Yeah.
And it's being able to find the right blend with flexibility, mobility, pliability, and being able to get out there and do what you want to do. And so you're seeing a lot of these guys now who are starting to break down a little bit, and they're breaking down at an earlier age. Now they're way faster, way stronger, way better athletes than they were during my era. But they're going to have to utilize the physios and their PT team to make sure that they're doing the right things more often, because it's easy to get in there and do things and cheat and say, okay, I'm going to do my lifting and start lifting and doing some benching and so forth, and you look great, you're ready to go to the pool. But to play for 15 years out on tour without injury, you've got to make sure you have a great team in place who monitors you, pretty much on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and I think, and again, talk about Tom Brady and Alex Guerrero as much as you want, but, to your point, these guys are lifting weights, they're getting stronger, but when you build muscle, there's side effects to that. There's
Sure.
trigger points, right? And again, when you talk about those trigger points, you need somebody who's skilled with their hands and knows where to look, where to find those trigger points. You could have great muscle length, you could have, hamstrings, and you could be the most flexible player in the world, but that doesn't mean that your muscle quality isn't perfect, right? Or is perfect, right? So just because you have full range of motion, and this is where in physical therapy we have trouble, as a field, defining what a trigger point is. Even like people can't even agree on what a trigger point is. It's a bundle of it's a rubber. It looks like a rubber band ball of muscle tissue under the microscope, and we know the effects of what happens when you hit it with a dry needle or you hit it with shockwave. It twitches. We call it a local twitch response. But when you stretch out those trigger points, an amazing thing happens. Your body just starts to heal, right? Because there's less tension on those tendons. Flow. There's more blood flow. And I think that's the biggest piece is, without really further technology like ultrasound or some of these, MRI machines, it's tough to qualify. Like, how do I say, how big your trigger point is? It's tough to measure that.
Sure.
But, that's truly what we do as a profession is we, and that's the skill in our job, in my opinion, is obviously identifying deficits. But if you're a professional athlete, chances are you're pretty strong. You got pretty good muscle length, but you're not maybe where you want to be, right? There's some obliquities side to side. But really, to get to that 1% better, now you're talking about minor tweaks. Maybe there's a trigger point right in your left low back as you're finishing that swing. That's where, the real skilled PT comes in.
And I can't agree more. And I think that you're going to see that almost every young player will not only utilize out on tour our physio, they're tremendous. But they will have their own team traveling with them more often than not, just because they want it around the clock, 24/7, How do we avoid injury? We're playing for way too much money
Right.
to be injured. And so we need to be the fittest we can be, but also being able to perform each week without injury. And that only happens with you guys and your expertise.
And I think, one last point too, Fran, to that is, it could be Justin Thomas or Tiger, have your own person, but there's value in working as a team, right? So
There is.
I'm a pretty good PT, but I might, Brogan might see something that I missed, right? And that's human error, right? Like we're going to we have different lenses. We have different experiences orthopedically. And I think that's why, here we treat as teams. And I think it's so important that, it's important that somebody knows your body, but it's also important that you get maybe a fresh set of eyes every once in a while. Oh, you didn't see this? And then it creates a dialogue. And then really who wins is the patient or the athlete, because now you're talking about how can we just, again, get that 1 or 2% better, especially if you're not making progress, you're not like exactly where you need to be.
Couldn't agree more.
But cool. So we have a closing tradition. So I always ask, favorite movie?
Ooh. Well, it's the holiday season coming up. So, well, my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies of all time is Top Gun.
Okay. I can see that.
Yeah, that's Top Gun's one of my all-time faves.
Which one did you like better, the new one or the old one?
The old one.
Yeah, the OG version.
Yeah, absolutely.
What makes you choose that over anything else?
I think I think it comes down to the skilled person who was part of a team, but you had to operate as an individual to accomplish the team goals. And you were only as good as you were going to perform, but you better have the team concept. And that's kind of what I do, And so that's would be one of the reasons why I would gravitate towards that movie.
That's cool. Favorite concert?
I think it was probably 15 years ago. And my wife and I went to the last time that they performed together, Billy Joel and Elton John down at Gillette.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was probably a good one.
That was unbelievable.
Love it.
Fantastic.
Words that you live by?
Give 100% to everything you do. If you give 100%, you will never look back in a right decision or wrong decision.
That's great. And I guess this one's personal to you, but what is the best advice that you've ever heard given or received that you would then pass on to an amateur golfer?
At the end of the day, I really think, and I would pass this on to my son who plays professional golf, is that, and this is something my dad always said to me, he said, believe in yourself. And don't look for everybody else to be out there telling you how good you are. You go out and be the best that you can be. And believe in yourself, believe in what you're doing, believe in your work ethic, and that will pay dividends.
That's awesome.
And it's kind of what I try to, instill in my kids.
That's great. Well, thanks again, Fran. Really appreciate your time. And
it was awesome. We'll do it again.
Perfect.
Love it.